There needs to be a main character who is a person of color on the next season of Outlander. Outlander has never done a good job with its representation of people of color, and it's really important as a historical fiction show that we do a better job of this. If we were to add a character who is a person of color, it would cover the real historical side of Black people in America, as in this time period, North Carolina had approximately 30,000 slaves. And by not including this, we are cutting off that entire historical chunk. And it's so important that we include that, because as we approach the Revolutionary War, we are going to need to discuss the role that Black people played in the Revolutionary War, because there were Black regiments, and the first victim of the Revolutionary War was a Black man. And so if we do not address the situation that Black people were living in at this time period, we're going to cut ourselves off from all of that political discussion that we could have if we were to include this character. Also, Black people are 13.6% of the population of just the US, and this show is available worldwide. And so, by not doing a good job of our representation of these people in this show, we are cutting off that entire audience, because no one wants to watch something if the representation of themselves is bad. Also, this would add good representation to this show, which, as previously discussed, is really important. It doesn't isolate people, it brings them in and it makes them excited to watch the show, because they have an aspect of themselves in the show. And it would add interesting political discussions. We are approaching the Revolutionary War, and Black people played a huge role in this, and it's important to discuss in more depth the political implications of slavery and how that affected the Revolutionary War, how it affects Black people, and how it affected the freed Black people of the time period. And it would also add that new layer of historical context where we actually address the Black people who were slaves and the Black people who were freed. And the freed Black people have a really interesting role to play here. If we do not include them, then we are cutting off the people who have actual experience with slavery and can actually help the white characters of the show understand the hardships that they go through in slavery, and they can help shape these political discussions into something that is more well-rounded and something that actually has meaning in the show, rather than just saying slavery is bad. It would also add yet another aspect of positive masculinity, as if this character comes to live on Fraser's Ridge, presumably they would have a good friendship with Jamie and the other men there, and we could have yet another example of positive masculinity, and we could discuss the intersectionality of Black positive masculinity, as this is typically something that is not seen often in the media. And then there's so many opportunities to do things with this character. We could have them meet Jamie on the way to free Claire, and then he moves to Fraser's Ridge, or he could be in jail with Claire, being returned to the people he escaped from, even though he's a freed slave, and they escape together, and Claire invites him to live on Fraser's Ridge. And when he gets there, there could be so many important political discussions about the prejudices and the stereotypes that people of that time period, and unfortunately people of this time period, still believe in, and we could address that by having a character who has experienced these stereotypes work to break them down. And we could give him agency to do this and to form his own life as a freed slave, which is really important, because this is something we have not done yet in this show. He could also join the Revolutionary War, because, as I said before, they played a huge role, and there were units that had Black soldiers, especially freed Black soldiers, who wanted to fight for a better country. And he could help Jamie switch sides, he could help other people on the community switch sides. He could do so much with this political discussion of joining the war and how Black people played parts in the Revolutionary War, and what they thought was going to happen after the Revolutionary War, which is something that has also not really been discussed yet. He could also help Roger with the church, as there's a large historical aspect of Black people and churches in the United States, and it could be really interesting to see that as well. He could also help Claire as an apprentice with her medicine, and this could be a really interesting way to play off of the angry Black male stereotype, as medicine usually requires some compassion that is not usually represented on Black men in the television industry. And he could also gain the trust of the community this way, and we could again talk about his intersectionality of how his prejudices and why the community trusts him are different from Claire's issues, as as a healer. And then far in the future, perhaps the season after this one, we could discuss the Jim Crow laws and the fugitive slave laws and how that impacts him as a freed slave. And he could perhaps run to the north and he could maybe get land. There were people who owned plantations, and he could create a haven for Black people to come to when they run away. He could maybe, if we even get this far, help with the Underground Railroad. There are so many things we could do with this character, and it is so important to include good representation in our TV shows, especially when it is historically accurate.